welcome this morning or this afternoon, wherever you're listening to us. I'm thrilled to have Kevin Riley with us. Kevin, he is a pastor in the Northwest Coast Presbytery, which is just above Seattle and below the border. But I think you're between Bellingham, right?
Yeah.
And Seattle and Mount Baker Presbyterian Church. And he's doing some amazing things. So what you and I have known each other for more than a few years. I think pre-COVID, when I visited the Northwest Coast Presbytery, and you and I met initially there. But since then, you've done some incredible things. And so, first, welcome to joining me
Thank
and
you.
Francis on this podcast. But there are some incredible things that you're doing. So, why don't you tell us your story of how do you even get into ministry, or even how did you even get to Mount Baker?
Well, that's a loaded question. First to back up to when you and I first met, it was at Edmonds PC. It was a Presbyterian meeting. You were there with 1001, and that was my first ever Presbyterian meeting as a CRE or a CRE in training. So I was scared, uh, or because Presbyterians are so scary. Um, but you know, uh,
Scary. Like Sean is scary sometimes, but I'm not. I'm super friendly. Sorry, go
I've been
ahead.
I've been to some Presbyterian churches where it's like you're preaching a sermon and that joke that hits everywhere just does not hit there, and it's like you just want to run.
Exactly.
Get that one. Yes.
How did I get to Mount Baker? I'll get the condensed uh version is my wife and I met in active addiction. We were homeless for a number of years, IV meth users. She ended up getting arrested in the parking lot of a Presbyterian church, um, pregnant with our oldest son, Asher. Uh, and then shortly after that is when I made the decision to get clean and sober. And I ended up spending like 2 weeks in the parking lot of a of a press PCUSA or Northwest Coast Presbytery Mission Partners church. I spent 2 weeks in the parking lot kicking dope on my own, all by myself. And then being in that parking lot, that organization, one of their staff was starting a men's recovery house in the building, residential treatment. And I was the second one accepted into that program and the first one to graduate. All the while, my wife had served her time in jail and then was living with her parents. And when she got out and I was in the recovery house, we kind of came together and made the decision that everything that happened in the past in using, we can't bring it up anymore and just throw it in each other's face. It's in the past, it's done. We know what happened. And we need to take time to work on ourselves individually and then come together, work as a couple. And so that's what we did. And and around November of that year is when we ended up getting a place together in Mount Vernon. And like I missed living in the church. I missed having uh that I don't know if like that constant witness to watching God move in different ways. Um whether it's a smile from somebody from getting a piece of bread or like, any all those little things. So we kept coming back. And eventually we started saying, when we join your staff, and it was Tierra Nueva, and it was like, when we become staff members, and they're like, whoa, what are you talking about? I'm like, no, I feel like I'm supposed to be a pastor. I don't know what that means, but um, when we come on staff, and so they ended up eventually bringing Danielle and I on staff. And we started out as outreach and jail chaplains. So we would actually go back into the jail, the place that held us captive, uh, uh, you know, the place, virtual darkness, basically,
Mm-hmm.
because the environment, and share our story and share the gospel with the people like sit right across from them in their dorms and stuff like that. As we were working there, Bob Ekblad knew about Mount Baker, and how they were without a pastor and trying to find their way. And so he brought a bunch of us out there to share our stories with their session. And on a whim, Bob goes, some of these folks want to go deeper and figure out what it's like to preach. Would you guys like to give them a chance? And Annie, who's the longest tenured member of the church, went, the second Sunday of the month is mine and you can have it. And
That's
so
awesome.
so Danielle and I, we got together, we met with a bunch of people, we wrote our first sermon. It was like 5 minutes long. Some lady in the front goes, that's it? And I was just mortified, you know? Uh and but then they called and asked me to come back. And they kept asking me to come back. And I started elaborating more and going deeper. And then one day, because whenever you preach somewhere as pulpit supply or whatever in the honorarium, unless it's worked out ahead of time, it's always awkward, right? To like, who do I talk to? How's this gonna work? And I went upstairs to find the lady that usually gave me the honorarium, and she was messing around in the sanctuary. And she finally turned around and sat down and she goes, Kevin, will you just be our pastor? And I'm like, I don't even know what that means. Um, and then another one of the elders came walking up behind me and goes, yeah, we've been talking about it for a while. We'd love it if you were our pastor. And I'm going, I'm working two jobs, one in ministry, one in building trusses and the lumber, and then uh and I'm moonlighting on Sundays for a little bit of extra cash because we're a young family. And now you're asking me to like give all that up and enter into ministry. Uh, it was pretty scary. Um, and I wanted to run away. Uh, but I sat down and talked with Danielle and talked with a bunch of mentors and stuff like that. And at first, everybody was like, no, 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 no. And we sat on it for a week, and for all the no's originally became the reasons why.
Mm.
So they flipped, and I became a member of the congregation. I got ordained as a ruling elder on session, and then they developed a learning study plan for me to become a CRE or commission pastor, depending on where you're at. Spent about
Pastor, yes.
yeah, spent about 13 months doing that, and it was one of those things where they're like, you can take your time and blah blah blah, and I'm like, no, dude, I see the finish line already. I'm running, and and I've been there ever since.
How long
I
have you
think
been
that
at Mount Baker?
I started in 2017, so that's when my
Wow.
official start day, like I guess you would call it an internship, learning on the go, because even before I was commissioned as their pastor, I mean, the COM had authorized me to moderate session and stuff like that. So I was doing all the things. The blessing that I had was everybody around me had been Presbyterians their entire life. So the session actually helped coach me through a number of things when it came to moderating session, like how I phrase a question or how phrase a motion, and I learned a lot in that space. And so yeah, 2017, and then I want to say 2018 is when I was actually ordained.
Wow. So that is an incredible story. 'Cause you think about, not many churches would take the time to mentor and to nurture people
Right.
up. They're like,
Yeah.
we need somebody now. And instead of saying, okay, we see the long haul of what is going on there. So
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
speaks to the incredible faithfulness of that congregation.
Yeah. I had a friend who he preached at another church up here, and he was like, man, they're just showing up to show up. They're not like leaning into anything, and they're just, as part of their muscle memory, it's not viable. He goes, but man, when I go out to Mount Baker and preach, like they were leaning in, and he was like, the Holy
Mm,
Spirit's not done there. So whatever is cooking, like you need to run with it. And so I did.
that is
That's
really cool. Yeah. Well, so you've been there since 2018, 2017, right? To be, like that's not counting the ordain and all that. Uh,
Yeah.
so you've been there almost 10 years.
Yeah.
Wow. And you've
Yeah.
gone through the COVID, right? And I wonder, can you talk a little bit about that? I'm just curious, because and I honestly don't know the makeup of the church. I don't know whether are they mostly seniors or
Mhm.
like so I wonder, can you share a little bit of that journey?
Yeah. Uh, COVID is what made us what we are today, in all honesty.
Wow.
Because we had the church at the time was maybe 4 or 5 people every Sunday. And leading up until COVID, uh, the the initiative or the mission or the idea, the vision that we created was cleaning ourselves up from the inside out, and then being who our community needed us to be. So I led them through, like, how do we hold the mirror up to ourselves as a congregation, and like how do we look at all the things that we've been nose blind to? Like, is that closet full of stuff that nobody uses anymore? Like, because if so, let's just throw it away. There's no use still holding. We can't grab a hold of tomorrow if we're still holding on to yesterday. Um, and so we started doing that, and then we ended up partnering with Skagit County Public Health and another nonprofit, and we did a pilot program for a cold weather shelter, and we housed everybody in the social hall of the church. Problem is our church is in city limits, so the town lost their mind, and uh, we ended up taking on the entire town and surrounding community in order to be able to house the homeless. And so
Wow.
when we did a public information meeting on how the shelter was going to run at the church, it was standing room only. Um, and when we went to the town council for our permit, it was standing room only out into the parking lot. And
wow.
the mayor called it the main event. But I mean, we stayed true to what we were doing, and we ended up getting the permit. And at the end of 4 weeks, uh, e- everything had gone great. And then, but that was right as COVID was starting. And
Mm,
then all these different things so we had all of that momentum, and then all of a sudden it was like boom, the whole world stopped. And it was what do we do now? Like, the pulpits that were once full or of people were suddenly empty and replaced with cameras, or sanctuaries, and like uh and it was in that time period we had the choice of to either quietly close our doors and say it's over, or we could roll the dice and reinvent our ministry. And I'm I love to push boundaries. I'm a hustler. I love to take chances and risks. I'm innovative. I'm entrepreneurial. uh, My wife says I can sell a woman wearing white gloves of ketchup popsicle on a hot afternoon, because like, um, and so Northwest Coast at that time put out a grant available for all of the faith communities of $5,000 to increase their bandwidth, like Zoom bandwidth, like
yeah.
reach people in their homes bandwidth. And I wrote the grant, and it was the first grant I ever wrote. And I wrote it and said, I don't want bandwidth. I want impact. And I
Mm,
want to use money to help buy food for people. I want to use money to buy coats and shoes for the neediest kids in the district that aren't going to get the resources that they need because of COVID. I want money to do this. And they ended up giving it to me. So that kind of flipped how uh, we started approaching our ministry. And the easiest way that I can describe it is like when you think of the widow with the two pennies giving all that she has, that's kind of how we looked at our community is like we can't we can't lean into the membership acquisition model. It's not going to do anything for us right now. So how about if we turn our coffers upside down and pour them into our streets?
Mm.
And that's what we started doing. And it started with handing out all the fixings for spaghetti dinner one day a week. And then we started handing out free diapers and then just thing after thing after thing. And as we started to open back up, we got invited to be a part of a coalition to bring medically assisted drug treatment to the community. So, yeah.
So even before that, how do you? I think a lot of this is like there's a lot of pastors that want to do things, but they can't get their congregation to make that turn. You know what I mean? To make that investment with them. There's a lot of pastors that have these great ideas of what is possible, but oftentimes congregations are like, well, this is the way we've always done it, and this is the way we always will. Church will be at 10 o'clock, and it will be led by the Gloria Patri or whatever. How do you get to help your congregation make those turns? You know what I mean? I think that's key, is that you're able to sell it to your congregation.
I think the question is, well, if that's the way you've always done it, is it still working?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's not still working, maybe it's time to change something.
Mm-hmm.
And it can start with little changes, small changes, micro changes. Like, if you have an older aging congregation that's scared to do some of the work that we're doing, that's cool. They can financially contribute to another church or nonprofit that's doing the work. They can volunteer. They can do all kinds of different things that will help invigorate a ministry and slowly build it. Like, just think of like a budding flower, the bulb pops up and then eventually it opens up and it's bright and beautiful. And that's kind of how I think about Baker right now. And it's possible for every congregation out there. They just, I mean, it just comes down to that leap of faith. Trust God and to doing something different.
And that's the hardest thing is to get out of ourselves. And I think Francis and I see plenty of congregations, whether it's in our presbytery or beyond our presbytery, that just can't get out of their own ways sometimes. It's like they are so stuck because this is what they've always known, that leap of faith of that unknown is what paralyzes them from being able to shift.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And Kevin, one of the things I really would value your insights or even what you think about it is that I we cover a big geography, and
Mm-hmm.
so several churches that are without pastors. And so, what do you say to those churches? They are desperate for some leadership, but at the same time, kind of hanging in there, you know? And I have a few churches that are looking and knowing they can't afford a full-time pastor. And my encouragement to them is like, well, then let's think outside the box. What are some of the things that we can possibly do? And I wonder, do you have any words for those small churches that are trying to be faithful, but yet feeling like against the wall all the time? Um, and having your experience with small churches, and how do you encourage those churches?
The first thing is don't give up. If you're really leaning in and you're staying faithful, God hasn't given up on you. The only problem is with that is uh, God very rarely meets our expectation of timing.
True.
And so it's really easy to give up because we're like, God's not moving, God's not moving. And we are so tunnel visioned on what's right in front of us. We're failing to see what God is doing around us. and how God is impacting other people. And it's almost like once you realize that, it's an invitation to join that movement. Uh, but when I came to Mount Baker, knowing that the church could not afford me, even at like base salary, 20 hours a week, uh, I worked at Tierra Nueva part time and worked at Mount Baker part time. And then after COVID is when I decided to make, or during COVID is when I made the leap to go to full time out at Mount Baker. Well, with Tierra Nueva, I already had, we had to fundraise for our salary there. Um, so I already had donors, people that had been supporting my ministry, Danielle's ministry. And we let them know what was happening and that we were making a move, and we got it approved by the Presbytery to fundraise for our salary, and we invited our donors to come with us. And then I wrote a proposal to the executive board asking them to fund us for 3 years on a step down plan. Like, so the first year was like they pretty much funded everything. And then anything that we fundraised kind of went into a rainy day fund. So we built up reserves for our salary. And then every year there was a step down and a step down. And then at the end of 3 years, we were on our own. And so, you know, there's different ways of doing that with different congregations. Like you can, uh, if you get somebody who is like entrepreneurial or can think outside the box, not afraid to fundraise, not afraid to go to some of the bigger churches and be like, look at this beautiful thing that's happening here. Would you like to help support it? You know, that, that's how I did it.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, I think fundraising is just something that it isn't a seminary class that's taught. It's not
No,
anything that's really taught in any of the ways of doing it, especially in today's age. Is especially in my presbytery, we realize that hey, per capita is not going to cover all the things that we want to do as a presbytery. So
Right.
we now actively, I have to actively fundraise. I have to actively like write grants and all the different things and not settle for what was or what per capita can support, saying we're going to constantly cut back and cut back, but saying here's what we want to be and to do. And to do that, it takes a commitment beyond simply per capita, but how do we need to do it, and to believe that God is a God of abundance, and we
Mhm.
just need to go find the people that are there, and not necessarily the people in the pews, but you have to go to other avenues in order to find those people.
We've been able to a lot, like after being there for a little while and bringing medically assisted drug treatment to the community, we've been able to sustainably fund ourselves through partnerships.
mm,
Um, so, as it is now at Mount Baker, I'm the only one that still fundraises for my salary. And we went from a staff of 1 to 2. Now we have 4 staff members. Everybody's full time. Uh, 3 staff, their wages are fully covered through a renewable grant for opioid outreach, stuff like that. Um, but I also, you know, being savvy and thinking through, like hearing all this stuff about board of pensions and this and that, I wrote the board of pension dues for all 4 of us into the grant. So I'm able to not only give myself, but all of my staff free healthcare because the
wow.
grant reimburses the church for what the church pays for our healthcare. And so, I mean, that right there, just even for congregations that want to give a congregational package or something like that, or retirement from the board of pensions, thinking like that, like, hey, can I slip this into a grant? That's going to save the church's money moving forward
Yeah.
Yeah.
because then it's just reimbursable.
Yeah, kind of going back, like you talk about that you have medical treatment and stuff like that at Mount Baker. How did you even figure out? You know, I mean, I think a lot of congregations they have themselves like, well, what can we do? How did Mount Baker and you even come to those places of making these decisions to take you down these new paths? I think a lot of times people are afraid to go make these decisions, and they're perfectly fine with the status quo. What led you down these different places?
So, concrete Washington is basically a services desert. It's the if somebody out in concrete before we started wanted to access some sort of drug treatment, and they did not have a car, it would take them anywhere from 12 to 15 hours just to go to an appointment because
Wow.
everything was down on the I-5 corridor. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that uh, it's a lot easier to break into the neighbor's shed and go to the dope man than it is to ride a bus for 15 hours for an hour an appointment every day. Uh, and, you know, our community, I then, I believe, had the highest addiction and homeless rate per capita for the entire county. There's a lot of poverty. So as things grew and expanded and cost of living got more expensive on the I-5 corridor, everybody moved further east. Well, now that expansion is starting to hit East County and starting to push people out. And it was, we could see this on our doorstep and we could see it everywhere. And I happened to get a phone call from the factor. Hold on, wait for it to go by. I just want to mess with Sean's editing skills.
There will be no editing skills.
He made it sound like he spent a lot of time. Actually, not. So don't worry. Go for it.
I actually ended up getting a call from the assistant director of public health saying, hey, there's a group of folks that are trying to bring medically assisted drug treatment to the community, and they need to partner with a faith community. And because of the way that you handled yourself with the pilot program for the homeless shelter and the way that you engaged with the community, we want to work with you again. Would you be willing to enter into these conversations? And I was like, yeah, totally. And so I took off running and started jumping into meetings and stuff like that. And then my wife came up behind me and she tapped me on the shoulder and she's like, you need to bring your session along. I'm like, oh yeah. And so I went back and quickly filled them in, and that taught me a very valuable lesson in that moment. Is now the session knows everything I do before I do it. But it was one of those learning opportunities, and met with my session, and they were willing to hear what the partners had to say, and then we did a group Zoom, and they were on board, and they gave us the go ahead, and we ended up signing on with I think Skagit County Sheriff's Office, Lifeline Connections. It was us and North Sound BHASO. And it was a coalition for a HRSA grant to bring that type of treatment to a rural area. And we ended up getting it, and it ended up starting in the social hall of our church. So, uh, uh, and then from there, it kind of, it didn't take off as quickly as we thought it would, but it didn't go away at the same time. And then we started running into some ADA issues, and because the church was built in 1908. And I happened to see a building that was owned by a counseling service for sale. And I called my friend with the county and I was like, hey, do you know anybody with influence at this organization? And she's like, I know the owner. And I'm like, put me in touch with him. Because there's this building and I think it'd be great if we can move all of this stuff to this building. Because our church is like literally across the street from the sheriff's office. And so out there. And so got in touch with them, went out there and toured the property, reached out to my session and said, hey, I know we don't really have the money, but can I rent this building? And can session commit to covering it for at least 2 months while I figure out how to pay for it? And they said yes. And
wow,
so
you have a nice session.
we signed the lease, and I ended up submitting a proposal to the county, uh, asking for them to fund the building for 3 years, all operational costs, rent, power, utilities, all that stuff. And they agreed. And so we ended up getting the county to fund it. So, and they still do. Um, and then at the end of the HRSA grant, uh, because of the work that Mount Baker had put into the community, North Sound BHASO, Behavioral Health Administrative Organizations, they're the ones that pay for like all the opioid outreach and crisis responders and stuff like that. They sent out a request for proposals for medically assisted treatment out there. And this is where it gets really cool. The one that submitted a proposal and ended up getting it is Digwalich, which is the treatment center that is operated by the Swinomish Indian Reservation or tribe.
Mm,
Uh, and so we are the first organization that they have partnered with in this way, where we now have their treatment staff in our building 4 days a week. We share office space with them, we share clients with them. And we have direct access to drug and alcohol assessments, direct access to telehealth with providers. We now have been able to get a methadone bus going all the way out to Marble Mount, in Marble Mount's, I don't know, another 12 miles from Concrete, go all the way out there and back to Anacortes. So they're doing about 60 miles one way to get dosed with methadone. And the community is different now,
mm.
Wow.
because we have that there. We've been able to get a van, and we help with transportation. We've put a box on the outside of our building that's filled with naloxone and test strips, so anybody can come get Narcan and drug test strips 24 hours a day. We've also partnered with Public Health and become a needle exchange under their umbrella. So uh, created a services hub for all things substance use disorder. And it's changing the community for the better.
That's great. Can you share a little bit about are you so the community service part of the ministry seemed to be really thriving and take off. And how did you see there's any correlation between like how, bringing people in, or do they come and because the process they got to meet Jesus, and how are you seeing some of that?
So our whole approach has always been just simply being the hands and feet of Christ uh,
Mm,
in our community, right? And not holding agency over the person that we are serving. And so if we can meet with somebody and bear witness with them as the Holy Spirit does what the Holy Spirit does, we don't hold agency on whether or not it's us that they worship with or somewhere else. We
mhm,
just want to help introduce them into community, a
mhm,
community that they feel safe and that they feel seen and they feel like they belong. So
mhm,
belonging is key to sobriety. Um, and so we've had quite a few people come from uh, receiving services from us. Going to church is never a requirement. It's, hey, we have a service this day. If you want to come along. We have people come, they'll come for a while and then they'll stop. And then they'll come back for a while and then they'll stop. It just depends. But I think every year up until last year, because it was a sabbatical year, every year up until that point, we had at least had baptisms every year of new believers, people who had converted, people who had turned their life over to God. And and saw us as the organization or the piece that had done that for them. And then present them to session and get sessions approval to baptize them and head out to the lake in the summer and have a barbecue and baptism. So yeah, is what we're doing increasing attendance? No, but that's not why we're doing it. We're doing it because our community is hurting. And we would rather spend our last $5 to ensure somebody ate than hold on to it to make sure we eat.
That's beautiful. And I don't know how to ask that question, but like I think a lot of church people would kind of come back and ask what is that doing to your attendance? So I'm glad you touched a little bit on that. It's where are we coming from? Are we here to serve the people, just the people because they're God's children, or
Yeah.
are we really here to serve people so we can somehow help ourselves in terms of
Yeah.
sustainability and all that. So I thank you for bringing that up.
I like that
And
whole idea that you're transforming the community. That
Yeah,
you know what I mean you're literally changing lives of
yeah.
people that were addicted and having issues, and you're
mhm,
literally transforming the community. And there's not many churches that can say that. We talk about vitality and stuff like that, and oftentimes, well, what do you do to transform the community? We're like, well, we give money to this or we give money to that, but not actually tangible being able to change the community.
Yeah.
yeah, I remember when I was homeless, I walked into a church, one of the biggest churches here in the valley, and I walked into the office and I was like, hey, my wife and my girlfriend and I were homeless. We need help. And the guy got up from behind the desk and he was really nice. And he kind of put his hand on my shoulder and started walking me to the door. And he goes, we contribute to other organizations for that. I'm like, but you're a church. Like, I thought I could come get help. He's like, we are a church, but we contribute to other organizations. Go see this organization or go see that organization. I'm like, I'm not there. I'm here and I'm asking for your help. And I got turned away. And I told myself that that would never be an experience for anybody at Mount Baker, uh, regardless of what kind of state that they came in. We would not turn them away. We would figure out a way to engage with them and connect them to whatever service that they needed to be connected to. Because you know what? That careful engagement will leave a lasting impression that just might change their life one day and give them an invitation into a faith community somewhere.
That's
And
beautiful. Yeah.
it starts with that one small act.
Yeah. So you touch a little bit on the idea of you want to make people feel like they belong. And we
Mhm.
want to kind of, how do you create that space? Like where do you start? Because it's, when Sean and I were talking about we really want people to feel belong to this greater body, not just like, oh, they can be part of it. Being part of it's not enough, right? Like, how do you actually make the other person feel like this truly they can call this their own? And I think that's the
Mhm.
beauty of belonging. And so I wonder if you can talk a little bit more about your approach to kind of make people feel like they belong.
Yeah, so I have two approaches, and I can email them to you guys at the end of this. One of them is the 5 C's, and I'll just give you the most important one, and that's curiosity.
Mm,
Being curious about the people who are coming into your congregation, like not curious in a way of like how can I get them to stay and tithe, but curious about like who are they, what makes them tick, what are their gifts, like would they fit well here, like how can I support them. And the other thing is we also operate out of the vital conditions framework, which as I touched on with you about the Inland Empire Community Foundation, they use the vital conditions framework. But at the center of it is civic muscle and belonging, and so how we legislate is how we decide who belongs. It's the
mm,
same within the church. who we elect to lead is who decides who belongs within the congregation. So if we're paying attention to that and we want to make sure people feel like that they belong, we need to be electing the right leaders, the right elders, the right deacons, the right lay people that are going to create a culture and sense of belonging for anybody who walks through the door.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because we even talked about that whole idea about belonging. Like it just happened. Like it's something that we've been talking about. It's like, okay, how do we get people to belong and understand that they're the beloved people of children of God? That ultimately, no matter what you look like, what background you come from, socioeconomic, where you were born or whatever, that we're all this children of God. And oftentimes we find our place. We find ourselves separated. I think that's just the natural way things are here. The people that have and people that don't, and it's just how do we become just this body of Christ? And that's the struggle, is how do
Yeah.
we just become this body of Christ that welcomes everybody? But you're like, well, they don't look like us, they don't act like us, they need to be doing church just like us in order for us to welcome them. If they want to raise their hands during worship, they can go down the street. Or there's so many different ways of how we divide up how we feel people belong versus people that we don't feel belong in our congregations or even with us.
Well, this I really appreciate when we were talking about some of the issues, current climate and all this political uncertainty, right? And we were talking about it, and I was like, Sean, I think we need to like strive for inclusivity, and he's the one that challenged
Mhm.
me, like not just inclusivity, but like how do we actually make people feel they belong, right? And I love that challenge because I can create everything. I can create the environment, I can provide the space, I can even give time, but ultimately it's the other side that need to tell me whether did I deliver? Did I get to the other side, right? Because belonging or not, it's not for me to say.
Yeah.
Right? I can be here saying, "Oh, you belong," but until the other side feels and can say, "Yeah, I feel like I belong here." Essentially, we're still in this process of making sure that people are included in the way that they belong, right? And so I've been thinking about that a lot, and I really appreciate your sharing about, how to create that and how to make people that first impression or that first connection with the other person is so critical. How you essentially you're planting seeds, right? And
Yeah.
and so yeah, I find that very inspiring. So thank you for sharing.
I challenged a bunch of nonprofits down there in the Inland Empire. So when I keynoted a couple of years ago, uh, it was no secret that I was a pastor, that I came from a church, and and right after that session of keynoting, I got whisked away to a breakout where they wanted to talk about church stuff, and it was full of different nonprofits down there in the Inland Empire that uh, for some reason had issues with the church, right? Church in general, not Presbyterians, but church in general. They're like, it's conservative this, it's conservative that, or it's this, or it's that. And luckily, I had a couple of people buffering for me because I was still trying to like regroup after being in front of a few hundred people. Um, and then I stood up there and I put one of those sticky pages on the wall, and I said, what is keeping you from partnering with the churches? And one lady goes, well, I work with the LGBTQIA organization and I feel like they're going to judge me for my work and blah, blah, blah. And so I wrote that down on the piece of paper. And I was like, okay, what about you? And so I ended up with like 4 reasons of why these nonprofits weren't partnering with churches. And I said, okay, let's stop right there. Now, what if all of those reasons you said that you don't partner with these churches became the reasons that you did? What if you went to the church and said, we really want to partner with you, but we don't feel like you'll partner with us because you're going to judge us in our lifestyle. And honestly, I've been judging you in your lifestyle and I'm feeling hypocritical. Can we have a cup of coffee? because regardless of what side you're on, the one thing that you can agree on is community. How do we work together to make the community better? And I challenged, gosh, there's so many in the room. And I think I think they started a faith community portion to what they were doing after that, and kind of kickstarted that. But um, you know, but I think that's the same with just people and ministry and that leap of faith in general. Like all the things that we write down of why we shouldn't do it, make them the reason that we should.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and chase it. And Sean, I think you were there at stewardship when I asked everybody from the panel, and I said, "Who in here is afraid of failure?" And like 98% of the hands went up. And I went,
Yeah.
"Why? Failure is what got me here in front of you today."
Mm-hmm.
And then just the light bulbs that went off on everybody of like, it's okay to fail forward.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because that's very much part of church planting. Like I failed way more than I succeeded when I was working through church plant events. That was like me and my wife and my couple core members that were the only ones showing up. Like, okay, that was a waste of a month of effort to put forward, but but it but we just have to be used to failing in
Yeah.
realizing that and we are too failure like not prone, the opposite of that, that we're adverse to failure.
Yeah.
That we're like we can't handle a failure because of blah 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 blah. But in life, even in our normal lives, failure is a part of it, and we just go,
Yeah.
okay, I failed on that. Let's just not let this happen again. Let's move to the next thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a part of our lives, and we shouldn't be so adverse to it that it paralyzes us. And I
Yeah.
think that's what gets in the way of churches, our lives, and where God's leading us sometimes is that we're afraid to fail, or that it leads us to uncomfortable places. Like,
Mhm.
hey, we have to have these uncomfortable conversations with these nonprofits that are judging us, and we're judging them for whatever reasons. That we need to have these meetings to be able to air out our grievances for one another. What you're thinking about me, what I'm thinking about you, and how can we come together for the good of the community and what
Right.
God is leading us to.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we were talking a little bit earlier that you're involved in much more than this medical stuff, that as this pastor of Mount Baker, that you are highly involved in your community. So it's not just that you're doing this one thing and that's enough. That like you are involved in everything in the community. What aren't you involved in?
I'm actually involved in a lot less than I was a year ago. Uh, so last year I was a part of the North. I was a charter member for the North Star Advisory Group, and what that was is it was uh, a coalition of 5 jurisdictions where all the mayors came together along with the county commissioners, and decided to create this joint coalition, I guess, to combat mental health and homelessness, realizing that mental health and homelessness and drug addiction, uh, housing insecurity, all of that stuff isn't something that just plagues one of our communities. It's something that plagues all of our communities. So how could we create something universally across the board that would help all of our communities as one? So I was the only faith community leader invited to that table, and the only one with lived experience at that table. And so I did that for 2 years, and I met some pretty amazing people, and some folks that used to do a lot of stuff within government down in Oregon, healthcare leaders, stuff like that. And it was in that space that I learned a lot about executive leadership and political leadership and stuff like that. But getting to work alongside uh, heads of the larger nonprofits, also working alongside the sheriff's office, like the Skagit County Sheriff's chief of operations. Like, so he's like way high up there. Um, like that dude gave me a hug. I'm like, I've never had a cop hug me unless he was handcuffing me. So like this is a total new experience. But it was building camaraderie in those spaces has been incredibly important. I stepped away from, or it actually ended right around the time I got back from sabbatical. So I've been able to move away from that. I was on the Northwest Coast executive board, but I stepped away from that when I came back from sabbatical because I was like, I was being pulled in so many directions. But one of the things that happened before I went on sabbatical is I was serving on the board for North Sound Accountable Communities of Health. It's a public health entity, spans 5 counties, direct engagement with all 8 local tribes. And the board chair at the time ended up resigning. And I was on their governance committee, and they're like, well, who do we have that we can put in this position? And I was just barely on my second year. They're like, hey, let's make Kevin the board chair. And so there was a lot of stuff that was happening that year that needed to be addressed. We were in a CEO search that wasn't going well. And so we kind of had to reorient everything. And I told him, well, I'll do it, but I'm still going on sabbatical. So you guys need to figure it out while I'm gone for this time. Came back, pretty much dropped everything except for North Sound ACH because of the regional impact that this tiny little church can have.
Mm.
Because we're not just affecting concrete anymore with me serving as the board chair for this organization. We're affecting Snohomish County, Whatcom County, Skagit County, Island County, San Juan County. So that's Everett North, basically, in the islands. And we just finished the CEO search. I just negotiated the contract with the new CEO. The press release just went out yesterday. And the CEO that's there now that's stepping down, she's like, you took something that wasn't viable and made it viable, as in the CEO search. And she's like, your leadership is your fingerprints are all over this. And now we're moving into an amazing direction. And for me, it's impacting the lives of the people who are struggling. Um, and, and so there's that cross pollination between faith community and secular nonprofit that when I joined the ACH as a partner, I was the first faith community that got brought in, and I had to deal with a lot of hard conversations because not only the staff, but a lot of the partners are people that have been wounded by the church.
Mm.
So I had to build those bridges. And it opened the door for other faith communities to come in. And now we've got multiple. And now, I'm sure if you would have told anybody within that organization 5 years ago that there would be a pastor as the board chair, they would have lost their mind. Uh, you know, and I'm coaching Little League this year. That's fun.
Great. Well, I don't know, we have a few more minutes here, but I do have one more question. Let's look ahead, five years from now. So where do you see Kevin at that point in 5 years?
Uh, that depends on my wife.
Good answer. I love that. Happy wife,
Uh,
happy life.
well, she's under care of our CPM right now.
Fantastic.
And she's doing the ordination exams.
Wow.
Uh, yeah, she's
Extra
like,
prayers.
and she's really challenged our CPM on how they approach things. Like, because she went and got a master's from the Seattle School of Theology and Psychology, and she ended up taking biblical Greek and Hebrew as an elective with a professor there, and and so those language classes, even as electives, they're the only class you got to be in. So that lowered her GPA down to like 3.89 or something insane like that. So she did a full master's program while working full time and being a full time mom as well.
Whoa!
Yeah,
You both are
Wow.
overachievers.
Wow.
and um
If
and
she's looking
so
for a call, we have plenty down here in Riverside.
I
San
will
Diego
tell
is
you,
better.
she grew up in Hesperia, so
Oh, really? Perfect.
yeah,
Perfect.
yeah.
We have churches looking, two or three out there.
We don't bring guests on, Francis, so you can try to poach them.
um and so she's currently doing that. She's we're both neurodivergent, and
Mm,
she failed the BCE, the Bible content exam, and
yeah,
so that just went to the floor of Presbytery, and it was a unanimous yes to allow the CPM to design a new Bible content exam to fit her with her ADHD.
yeah.
And the CPM, before that even is finished, gave her permission to start taking the other tests. Because, my understanding is you have to do Bible
Absolutely.
content first,
Yeah.
and then you can take the other ones. And they're like, no, let us work on this. We're excited for what you're going to do. Go ahead and start working on the other tests. And at the time, she's Cherokee. She was doing a Cherokee language class, and she's like, "I will start on those after I finish my language class." And in that class, she got like a 98% of learning Cherokee, and it's like it's
Wow.
just insane, dude. But so it depends on how her path to ordination pans out. Um, you know, I think at some point I might like to get into some consulting or coaching
Hmm.
with rural churches. At first, when you first think about ministry, you think about the big cities, the inner cities, and all the people and the huge amount of need. And you forget that the same need is in the hills as well. And so it's got a real special place in my heart. And if there's ways that I can come alongside or help rural congregations think their way through things to engage in their community, I want to do that. Um, yeah.
Fantastic.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, you and your wife are both overachievers, and God has had an amazing journey for both of you to where you are, to what you're doing. And who would have thought that a little church like Mount Baker could have that impact in their community in cement as much as it has? And that is
Yeah.
just God moving through you and through them. And so we're thankful for that.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
Yeah.
so our last question that we ask everybody is, what is your favorite food? What is that comfort food when you need something? You need a hit of something just to bring you back out of the stress or whatever. What is that comfort food or your favorite food? And the bonus points if it's a particular place or person that's making it.
So when the world is dark and everything is upside down, and neither my wife or I can see the light, uh, we will throw on some punk rock, some Rancid, some No Effects, Dropkick Murphys, whatever, just like, total anti-establishment music. And we'll play it really, really loud. We'll go into the kitchen and we'll make a lasagna together.
Mm,
And when we make homemade lasagna, we do it together, cook it together, the whole 9 yards, and then we sit and eat it together. And you got to have that there's comfort food of like, oh man, this Butterfinger Blizzard's amazing tonight with this movie, right? But then there's like that soul food, that
Yeah.
food that changes how your heart is feeling in the moment. And when you get to spend time, just like the psalmist says, groaning through your bones or through your body, not having to say what you're feeling, but your body is exuding that, and to be able to play punk rock and make lasagna and share it with the person that you love the most. That is my comfort food.
Well,
That is awesome.
that's awesome, but I feel like I need to ask one last question. So, what's your favorite punk rock band?
Oh, that is that is a hard one. You know, I love Rancid. I've always loved Rancid. Anytime they come to town, I go see them. Uh, but the thing I think I would have to honestly say, the Dropkick Murphys, because the first time I saw them, I really only knew two songs, but their show was so energetic that they're one of those bands that I like never buy an album, but I will go to every one of their shows when they come around. And the last one that we went to was down, there's this new venue in Tacoma, uh, and we ended up getting really close to the stage, and my 11-year-old, who's autistic, was just loving it, jumping up and down, bouncing all over the place. That the guitarist kept coming out and handing him picks, and like, other band members were coming out and handing him stuff, and and of course you got the old people who are like trying to reach over and they're getting mad and smacking their hand away just to give my kids stuff. And Ken Casey, the singer for the Dropkick Murphys, has been clean and sober for like 35 years or so. And Danielle and I just celebrated 12 years clean and sober this year. At the end of the show, he came walking by and I just held out my phone with my mugshot. He stopped and he looked at me and looked at Danielle and he goes, "Is that you guys?" In this big old Boston accent. I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "Get over here." And he just gives us this big, huge hug and
That's
let us take a
great.
picture with him, our whole family and everything. And it's like, it was, it's that engagement that pushed it over the top for me.
That is
But
awesome.
That's
Hey,
yeah,
just to kind of follow up, if you want to know more about Kevin and all that he's doing, he has a website, kevin-riley.com. So if you want to check out Kevin and reach out to Kevin and kind of hear more about what he's doing. Yeah, and you're a frequent speaker in places. You were just at Stewardship Kaleidoscope. Where are you anywhere soon?
I don't think I'm anywhere soon, thankfully. Um, I'm not. I don't have anything big coming up soon, but you never know. I might get pulled into some things with some of the stuff with North Sound ACH and Washington State's working on becoming a state of belonging, and is a lot of it's being done through state agencies and stuff like that. And North
yeah,
Sound is kind of leading the way with that.
yeah.
Um, so I
And
might get
then
pulled
we
into
did a
some of
Matthew
those
25
spaces.
video on you too. The PCUSA did a Matthew 25 video on you, and you just sent me a link to another video of you. So we'll post that somewhere, and you can.
Yeah,
Yeah, we appreciate your time, Kevin. It's awesome hearing the story of what God's doing in you and your wife and your family.
Yes. Yeah.
thanks, man. Can I
Yeah.
do one more shameless plug?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, Rooted Good. Those folks are amazing, and their booklet on how to partner well. Um, I was the only PCUSA rep there that helped design that material. So I need to shamelessly plug that for churches that are looking to partner with other organizations. I helped write it, and it's amazing.
Yeah, our Presbytery is giving away the Rooted Good Accelerator to any church that wants it, and so
Yeah. And we
so
do
we
have a church doing the accelerator program right now. So,
yeah
Yeah,
so Rooted Good is an awesome group of people, and so we had
yeah,
Mark Elston and Mark Sampson in our Presbytery earlier this year.
yeah.
yeah. The Marks and Shannon are pretty rad.
Yes, they are.
Yeah.
So
So
thank you.